Today I'm listening to the 12 Piano Preludes by Russian composer Galina Ustvolskaya. Um, I think I have all of them here. Let me just check real quick. Yeah, I have all 12 here. The scan is really bad because I made it, and the score I was scanning was like a 9 by 12, um, like concert size score, and obviously my printer was just an 8.5 by 11 printer or scanner. Um, yeah, these pieces are really interesting, and this composer is really interesting. It's our first Ustvolskaya episode. I believe they were written in 1953, which is sort of it's one of her oldest pieces. She has a very small body of works that she actually um, considers her mature work. I think starting with her uh, piano concerto, maybe, or maybe her first symphony. Um, Yeah, she studied in the Soviet Union, obviously, and was a student of Dmitri Shostakovich. We'll get deeper into that in a bit. She really came to fame in the 1980s, though, so a lot of her work was unperformed for decades and sort of unknown in the West. And then I guess around the time that the Soviet Union was starting to crumble, um, people started to advocate for her music and discover her music. I was really obsessed with Ustvolskaya as a young composer, like in my 20s, early 20s. Um, it was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. I believe at the time there was a lot of stuff you could find online, um, like performances and documentaries. And pretty much all of her scores were available to me because I was studying at the University of Toronto at the time, and they have a really great music library. Maybe the most extensive in Canada. I'm not sure. She was born in 1919, died in 2006. She was known as a recluse, barely interviewed, found it unpleasant to talk about her music, and as I was alluding to earlier, she only approved 21 of her works for performance, so it's a really small body of work. She studied at Leningrad University. When she was studying with Shostakovich, she was the only woman in his composition class, and Shostakovich held her in very high regard, consulting her during the composition of some of his own works, and he treated her as a colleague. Their relationship, I think, is a little bit creepy. Like he showered her with too much affection, and there's just something sort of like uh, inappropriate about it feeling. Like I don't know if I can find it here, but yeah, she has this famous quote: "One thing remains clear as day: a seemingly eminent figure such as Shostakovich to me is not eminent at all. On the contrary, he burdened my life and killed my best feelings." So this is Ustvolskaya writing. It feels very their relationship feels very like inappropriate, and I don't want to like accuse Shostakovich of like sexually assaulting her or anything, but it just feels like that, like he crossed a lot of boundaries with her. Also, she like after studying with him became a recluse and lived in a swamp by herself for decades. So it's a story you have to kind of piece together through different anecdotes. Like he was a very powerful man, you know, especially at that time in the 1930s, and she was just like very young. Yeah, she was sort of her works in the over the 40s and 50s were like socialist realist pieces. including this one piece, Stepan Razin's Dream, which was nominated for a Stalin Prize. And throughout the 1950s, she composed propagandistic works for the Soviet Union, which is sort of what every Soviet composer did. But this music has very little to do with what she actually became famous for in the music um, that she championed, those 21 pieces. Um, which you'll see listening to these is very severe. It's like um, she's famous for this style that is like almost all quarter notes and highly dissonant, but also contrapuntal. And I can't remember the name of the documentary, but she talks about how with a lot of these pieces, like her piano sonatas, her symphonies, she would like internalize the entire piece before writing the first note. So she would know how everything went beat by beat. And that process of composing in her head mostly results in these types of pieces that are very like um, rhythmically limited, you know. Okay, how did she become famous here? Her modernist music became more recognized in the 1960s, and eventually the Leningrad branch of the Union of Composers organized performances of her music. And then international awareness of her music started in the 1989 Holland Festival. So this is right around the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall. She died in St. Petersburg. Her manuscripts are stored at the Paul Sacher Stiftung and have been since 1994. Yeah, she's publicly said that her music is spiritual. This is another pattern you're going to see in a lot of post-Soviet composers is that they're often very religious and spiritual because religion was banned under the Soviet Union, and obviously there's a real wealth of music that is sacred. Oftentimes, like some composers were so heavily censored that, like for example, Mozart, you wouldn't get to hear their music unless it was their sacred pieces in the Soviet Union. So that's another thing is like there's this sort of like fascination with what's going on in the West and where music is heading, despite the censorship that you have to deal with in the Soviet Union, kind of thing. From 47 to 77, she taught at Leningrad Conservatory. Um, she taught her students about polyphony and counterpoint, and showed them works by composers who were banned up until the 1960s, when she was allowed to. So she was very much like aware of what was going on in classical music and trying to give her students access to this stuff. Here, for example, Mahler and Stravinsky are mentioned. I don't think there's much else I can say that isn't evident when you start listening to her work. So, yeah, we'll just listen to these. It looks like her first piece is the piano concerto in her opus. It's 1946, and then the last thing she wrote was her Symphony Number 5, which was completed in 1990, which was still quite a few years before she died. Yeah, let's get into this, and I'll let you know what I think of these preludes. Okay. Yeah, these were fun to listen through. I'm really under the weather today, so it was difficult to pay attention, but it still kept my attention, you know? Like, I used to know these pieces really well, so revisiting them was nice and nostalgic. Um, yeah, I'm kind of embarrassed how much I was trying to copy this style as an undergraduate student. It was kind of like ridiculous. But I think these pieces are really interesting. There's a great variety of things going on in them. My favorite movements were usually the louder ones. I think they're catchier. like movements Prelude 5 and Prelude 7. Prelude 7 is like it's the shorter one. It's a shorter one, but it's really catchy. Um, and then the first movement out of like the quiet slow ones, the first movement's probably the first prelude is probably the best. I just find it really enigmatic and interesting. Um, Interestingly, my score here differed from the recording in that preludes 11 and 12 were flipped in this score video with regards to this score. So I think that's kind of interesting because the 11th prelude is not very substantial. It's sort of short and open-ended, whereas I think the 12th prelude does make a bit of a stronger ending. I guess it depends how you want the piece to end if you play all 12 of them. Um, yeah, she's really good at weaving these like chromatic lines that are mostly moving by step, right? So it seems like kind of atonal music that's really, really informed by uh, like Renaissance counterpoint. Just looking at the lines themselves, it's like very Renaissance looking almost. I also like the moments where she starts repeating notes. That's always an interesting feature in her music. Also, a lot of double flats, so she tends to spell things in a way that preserves the look of the musical line, right? So a lot of these are in flatland to begin with, and there's just a lot of double flats as she veers off of whatever tonal center you could argue they start in. Um, yeah, if you liked this, I would highly recommend her piano sonatas. I think they're a bit more substantial pieces. But these preludes are more like an intro to her style. They feel almost like pedagogical because they're like 2 and 3 part inventions for the most part. Like you only ever get 4 voices when you have these occasional chords. There's long stretches of music where it's just kind of like one voice over a drone. So I think it really introduces you to the technique of composition she was developing in the 50s. So yeah, that's it for Ustvolskaya. I'm going to uh, just edit this video and go to sleep now. Hopefully I'm feeling better tomorrow because I'm barely holding it together today. And I couldn't even record yesterday. I was so sick. Like, yeah, I haven't been this sick in years. Okay, what's next? Intersection 3 by Morton Feldman. It's probably going to be a short one. And the day after that, some Chelsea. That'll be fun. We haven't looked at any Chelsea since the string quartet series, which was more than a year ago now. So, yeah.